Let's get into the main body of this presentation of this session, and on the topic how to face an interview. So the main agenda for this is I'll be covering the points: what is an interview, the general guidelines to follow prior to the interview, why you actually need to prepare for an interview, and how you prepare for an interview, and from an employer's perspective, what an employer looks for, and the importance of first impressions, interview do's and don'ts, dress code, and of course related outlook for the interview, and at the end, how you close the interview. So yeah, so this is just a basic definition that I pulled up here on what is an interview. It's basically a formal meeting with one or more persons to question, consult, or evaluate one person for job suitability. So the context we're looking at is here for a job interview. And this is what a lot of you all will face, whether you all are looking for internships or when you all graduate and you're looking for your first job. So remember, the main point of an interview or the objective of an interview is to gain as much information as possible about the other party. So this works from both sides. You could be the interviewee, in which case you're trying to, when you're speaking to the interview panel, you're trying to gain an understanding of what the company is like, what the company culture is like, and how people work there based off on just the actions and personalities of the interview panel. And on the flip side, the interview panel is trying to assess you to see whether you're a suitable fit for the position. So obviously, at the end of the day, it's all about how you communicate, how both parties communicate, and sell themselves in terms of their skills and culture to the other person. So here, let me go over a few general guidelines to follow prior to the interview. So number one, preparation, and I can't stress this enough. Preparation is key. And this is one of the easiest things you can do prior to any interview. You can always research the company. So the goal of researching a particular company is so that when you walk in for an interview, whether it's you have at least have some preliminary idea of whether it's the sort of place you'd want to work for, whether you're happy with the culture there, whether you're happy with their practices, and maybe what sort of impact they have in society. So these might be things. I mean, these things are different, from person to person, but do not underestimate company. So all the rules are scope out their competition. So maybe the easiest way for you to look at the competition would be maybe go through LinkedIn, go through a few news articles maybe, and see what pops up when you type in competitors to a particular company. Also look at what a company is doing at the moment. So check out their social media channels, see if they're trending on news maybe, to see what's happening or what's going on right now. So especially in situations like right now during the pandemic, a lot of companies are handling this very, very differently. So maybe if it's important to you to know how a particular company is doing and how they're being dealing with society during this particular period, go and check their social media pages, go and check news, see what's happening and what they're doing. So in addition to that, you should also know what products and services a particular company is known for. So for example, at Cisco Labs, maybe if you read up on our website, you gain an understanding of what we're working on and some of the people we are working with. So our stakeholders are predominantly in the US, since we work directly for Cisco Corporation. But if it's a different company, if it's a product-based company, for example, they might be working with numerous companies across the globe. So it might be good for you to gain an understanding of what those companies are, because if you were to join that particular company, you would you'd have a better understanding of where you'd be, who you'd be working with. And of course, if you want a really detailed idea of the company, you can always go through their annual report. So that gives you a lot of detailed information on the company and how it's doing financially as well. So it's something good to check out if you have a bit of time on your hands prior to the interview. So again, the point of this is so that, in addition to all the points I've noted above, if during the interview, an interview panel member asks you, what do you know about this particular company? You're not caught flat-footed. You don't suddenly become nervous and you're at a loss for words. You never want that to happen. So this is something that's very easy to do. So always take a bit of time to prep and research the company. Also, when you're at the stage when you have been called in for an interview, before going for the interview, always remember these three key points: who, when, and where. So you always need to know who you're being interviewed by, not just the company name. If at all possible, try and figure out get the names of your interview panel. So the point of doing this is that you can always check them out on LinkedIn, get to know who the person is a little better, so that when you walk in to that interview, it'll at least be a little easier for you to build up a rapport with that particular person, so that everything won't be super formal. You know who the person is, and you can maybe have 1 or 2 points to where you can find some common ground a little fast. Of course, you should know where the interview is happening and when it is happening. And always remember to keep more than enough time to get to the interview and go through the building and find, for example, finding parking is also not easy these days, especially if the interview location is in Colombo. And not all companies will have designated car parks. So you always make allowances for that, the time it takes to reach your destination, and plan to arrive at an interview about 15 to maybe half an hour before the interview is slated to happen. So let's talk a little bit about why you actually need to prepare for an interview. See, remember, at the end of the day, you are just going to be one candidate amongst many candidates. So in your particular scenario, you all are graduating. Let's say you all are graduating in October. You will have almost every person in your batch apply for, maybe even the same position. So as a candidate, your goal is to show the employer that you are the best person for the job. And during an interview, we have very limited time to assess you and figure out who you are and what sort of skills you possess. So as an employer, we always want concrete examples to identify your skills. So we want to know that what you have learned before or what you are listed on your CV is adaptable, transferable, and is related to the job that you're being interviewed for. So example, let's say on your CV, you have listed 10 skills. In your head, before you come for the interview, at least try and have examples for each of those 10 skills, so that if you're asked to give a little bit more detail about a particular skill, you can just go give a concrete example of why you think that particular skill you have is going to be directly relevant to the job at hand. And always use facts when you're presenting that those achievements, or maybe highlighting particular things that we're proud of, maybe in uni that you did. Use data, numbers, volumes, percentages, whatever is applicable. Always keep it factual, so that anyone can really understand at a glance. So you did this, and maybe increased, maybe just as an example, maybe increased maybe sales volume by 20% over a 2-week period. So since you're including percentages, people know that you mean where you've done your research, and you know what the impact of your actions have been. So always try to relate your strengths and expertise to the job on offer, and emphasize the results. Obviously, what happened as a result of your skills and the effort you put in. And always try and link it out to the job at hand. Sometimes you don't need to go on about maybe some achievements you had in running when you were 5 years old, and try and relate that to an IT position at hand. So some of these things will not be relevant. So use your common sense. So always link the skills that you're good at with the skills that the employer is looking for. And in terms of how you prepare for an interview, it always starts with the CV itself. As an employer, as part of an interview panel, and as a recruiter, first thing I see is your CV. So I will always try to, I will get an idea of who you are, your personality and your skills based on the content on your CV. So always be familiar with everything you have on your CV. Because if it's on your CV, that means we have every right to question you and drill down into what you have written there. So be ready to discuss all of the skills, responsibilities, and projects you mentioned on your CV. And also in terms of preparation, go online, go through frequently asked interview questions to get an understanding of the potential questions you may be asked during the interview. So this is mainly, this is very useful, especially when you're going for first time interview. You have no idea, what may be asked of you. So sometimes you might even feel that an interview panel might be getting too personal with some of the questions. So to get an idea of, what's appropriate, what's not, go online and see what other, candidates have said, and what the normal, what these normal interview questions are, so that you can sort of prep beforehand. And always do a couple of mock interviews. So you can always do this with maybe your friends. Sit down and do a few mock interviews, because it will not just help you; it will help whoever is conducting the mock interview for you as well. So whenever you're doing a mock interview, when you're the candidate, playing the role of a candidate, uh, you know, don't take it easy. Take it very seriously. Put yourself, as if you were at an actual interview, and make it tough on yourself, so that when you go for the actual interview, you'll be mentally prepared. Get your friends to throw tough questions at you. Get them to ask you, drill down into specifics, maybe regarding some of the skills you mentioned, some of the projects you're listed on your CV. Go down into detail. Get them to ask you the tough questions, so that at an actual interview, if one of those questions is asked of you, you're already mentally prepared for those questions. Yeah. So this actually leads on a little bit from the mock interview. So do mock interviews, but don't have some sort of pitch down to the extent that it comes across that you're reading off of the script. So you don't need to have every answer perfect. And for example, if someone asks about you, tell me a little bit about your background. You don't want to all of a sudden be like just reading off like a little piece of paper, like I'm this, that, and I've done this, blah, blah, blah. That's not what we want to hear. Keep it natural, right? So, for being familiar with the content of your CV and doing mock interviews will get you ready. But there's also such a thing as over preparation, where you come across as very formal, and like this little picture here shows, where it seems like you're reading off of the script. So don't get to that point. We, as an interview panel, we also want to see you. We want to see you be natural, and we want to see the authentic you at the interview. One second, please. Yeah. So, and now in terms of what an employer looks for, so obviously this is going to change from company to company and domain to domain. But these are just a few things that all apply to generalize, and what all company employers will be looking for. So they always look for evidence of logical thinking. So for this, you can always use examples of what you've done really maybe or even before that in school, the projects you've worked on, and specific examples that you can relate to this. So there's, I think, a ton of things and examples that anyone can use to prove, that they can think logically. So be prepared with that, because an employer will always want to see evidence of that. And then we have adaptability, again, something you can use examples of maybe during, or maybe of things that happen during your actual projects. Maybe a group member dropped out and you were left maybe in a group of four. Your fourth member maybe dropped out, and all of a sudden, three of you all were trying to do the work of four people. So maybe the challenges you all faced and how you all overcame them. Those would also be examples of adaptability. And if you're successfully met with expectations at the end of the day. Then you have versatility. Again, this ties in with being able to play multiple roles. So it's not just about being playing the role that you were assigned, but also being able to look beyond, look at it in the context of a team maybe, and see, okay, that these things are not happening. Maybe I need to step up. Maybe I need to be the leader. Maybe assigned group leader is not making enough effort. Maybe I need to step up and fill those shoes. So it's all about seeing gaps and stretching yourself to fill those gaps. Then we have teamwork. This is a little tough to test for during an interview, like because uh, this is something that is usually more seen in practice. But all companies look for team players, because very rarely do we look for solo players where a person is isolated working in a single silo. and does everything by himself or herself. So be a team player, right? Because it's going to help you out in the long run. Of course, and then of course we have organizational skills and being organized. So there's a saying, time is money. So especially in the workplace, you'll find that you need to organize your work so that you can get things done efficiently and as fast as possible. And of course, we have creative thinking. So this again, you can use examples of maybe particular problems or challenges you faced, maybe while working on particular projects, and how you came up with some sort of creative or innovative solution, some out-of-the-box solution to the problem at hand. So use examples wherever possible to highlight these traits and behaviors. We have problem solving, leadership, and finally communication. So communication is very, very important. So communication skills. So this relates to, it actually is seen at the very first, when you send across your CV, we can assess your written communication skills based on how you put your CV together, how you're putting down your summary, how you listed down your skills, whether there are any grammatical errors, whether there are any typos. So even your CV is a reflection of you to a certain extent. And then finally, when you come in for the interview, we can assess your actual spoken skills. So spoken and written communication skills obviously are very important, in this particular day and time where we're working with, geographically dispersed teams. Now, especially now in a company like Cisco Labs, you'll often find yourselves working with teams in the US, even we are located here in Sri Lanka. So maybe your product owners will be in the US, and we'll be having to communicate with them almost daily. So communication is very important because you don't want to create any communication gaps where information falls through, and that only creates misunderstandings. So do not underestimate the importance of communication and proper communication skills. So focus on that. If you think you're not up to the mark, you'll still have more than enough time, right? You're still in third year from what I understand, so you all have more than enough time. So focus on those communication skills and brush up. Go for classes if you all have to, maybe join a club like Toastmasters where you get to practice your public speaking skills. Do as much as you can to improve that so that when you walk in for an interview, you are the best version possible of yourself. So let me talk a little bit about the content you need to put on a CV and CV writing tips. Make sure you include your education, experience, skills, qualifications, and personal information. Personal information, I just need your name, address, phone number, and email address. It's just a way for you to figure out how to contact you in the event that you're shortlisted for an interview. Skills, this includes not just technical skills, but also the soft skills as well. So make sure you list them out. Anything you want to highlight, put it right up on top. Qualifications goes without saying. Make sure to include them, and experience. If you have any highlights or achievements in whatever the past roles you have played, put that under your experience as well. So at the end of the day, understand the purpose of your CV. So your CV is there to get you into the stage where you're called in for an interview. It should be good enough to get you in through the door, and it should give an interview panel an idea of who you are within a couple of minutes. So on your CV, be specific, give examples of, say, like I mentioned earlier, any particular achievements, give examples, give factual information, and give data, and use keywords when referencing your qualifications and experience. So there's a point I want to make here. So a lot of people these days use buzzwords on their profile as well, like as saying they work with machine learning, example, and AI, for instance. These are just buzzwords, right? So what I'm looking for, or what we're looking for in the CV is not that. What we're looking for are keywords. And by keywords, example, let's say you have a particular certification, use the proper keywords. Example, you have an AWS, if you maybe are an AWS certified solutions architect. Use those exact words because CVs often go into applicant, management systems. And, usually those systems will pick up keywords from your CV, and based on those keywords, it will rank your profile. So the more relevant keywords you have, the higher ranked your profile is going to be. And also from recruitment point of view, when I see these particular skills listed in maybe using particular keywords, I get at a glance instead of reading through your CV in detail. I can tell at first glance, okay, that your CV is going to be something relevant. So use keywords and not buzzwords. And of course, at the end of the day, avoid overselling yourself. You don't want to, be like, I'm the best person for this. I've been the best person in the world in this particular area for this thing and that thing. Don't be that. Stick to the facts. And if your facts should speak for themselves. If you're that good, you'll be able to convince an interview panel during the interview. So you don't need to oversell yourself and come across as cheap, by putting unnecessary details on your CV. And of course, avoid generic phrases and be original and let your CV reflect your personality. So we don't want, inhuman, not inhuman, but at least, drones, people who are copies of each other. So make sure your CV is individualized and customized to yourself. So always try and do it yourself, but even if you're getting someone else's help to do your CV, make sure that that CV is a reflection of you as a person. Don't just go off some sort of standardized template and change the name, change the project name, and change the role a bit, change the skills. Don't do that. Always try and build your own CVs from scratch so that you know what exactly is there and it reflects you. Yeah, so again, this is just a little bit more detail regarding CV writing. Always make sure your CV is formatted appropriately, appropriately, and identify specific accomplishments, quantify them, and tailor your CV to the role you're applying for. For example, let's say you're applying to a software engineer position, and look at the job description for the software engineer position online. For example, if you're applying for software engineer position at Cisco Labs, look at our software engineering JDs that we have published on our career page, and go and think over your skills, your experience, and highlight those skills and experiences, whatever you have, to the role at hand. So it could be any position, but look at the JDs and look at the skills and experience you have and try and focus on them or bring them up to the top, highlight them. So again, at a glance, any interview panel can see, okay, this person may not have any work, for example, in our case, may not have any work experience, but his or her project experience is somewhat of a fit, and he or she seems to be willing to learn, and so we call you interview based on that, based on the potential we see there, we call you in for an interview. So yeah, incorporate keywords. And guys, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, start creating your LinkedIn profiles now. A lot of times if you want people to reach out to you, if you want to get headhunted, it's all most of the time it's going to be through LinkedIn. So make sure your LinkedIn profile is updated and matches the contents of your CV. And of course, briefly summarize experience in every position you've held. And of course, we don't want to see CVs that are pages and that's like a book. Keep your CV as short as possible. Ideally, if you keep it to between 1 to 2 pages, that would be perfect. But sometimes if you have projects, I understand, especially for IT and engineering positions, your CV, you may have to give a bit more detail regarding those projects. So for those projects, create an appendix and give the details in that section. But keep the main content of your CV as short as possible, between 1 to 2 pages max. All right, and of course, say prepare it in a format that can be viewed easily on most computers. And by that I mean PDFs, right? We don't sometimes doc and docx documents show up differently on different computers and laptops. So always try and save your CV as a PDF. Yeah. So at this point, let me hand over to Geethanga, who will be taking over the next part of this session.
Roshen.
Yes.
So I should share the screen, right?
Yes, Geethanga, yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Okay. Mm, so yes, let me see how I look in the camera. Yeah,
Looking good.
all good, right? Yeah. So yes, let me share the screen, Roshan. Roshan, my share content button is disabled.
Let me double check. Just hold on for a second.
Sure. Yeah, now it's enabled.
All right, yeah, perfect.
Uh, I'll take it from here.
Yes,
So
please go.
yeah. So basically, Roshan discussed about how you should prepare yourself for an interview, as well as how you need to prepare your CV. And basically, he discussed many things uh, that are applicable before the interview. How are you going to get selected for an interview? And what are the things that you should do before you get selected to an interview? So I'll be mainly trying to take you through the things that you should do and perhaps you shouldn't do as well during an interview, right? So let me dig into details. Um, so if I tell you about the first thing that I'm going to discuss today, uh, you need to have a checklist of items. So basically you shouldn't forget anything, right? So you have to have a list of items that you need to bring to the interview, and it includes things like of course your resume, and maybe details of your personal referees, because it's very important that you have uh, referees added in your CV. So you have to have details of these people as well, and also your identity card. Nowadays, you are not allowed to enter a facility without your identification, especially when it comes to Cisco Labs. We have a very stringent procedure when it comes to uh, uh, getting into the office. Uh, so and also you might have to have a personal details like professional portfolio, something like that. And of course, you could bring university transcripts as well. Uh, so let me get into the next section. But generally, the main checklist might have a lot of items other than the items that are listed here, but this is just a guideline that you should follow. Basically, the idea is that you should have a some sort of a checklist so that you won't forget anything on the interview day, because we all know that it's some sort of a tense situation that you're going to face. So in that case, these checklists would come very handy. So when it comes to the interview itself, it's important to have a personal brand. Basically, you should brand yourself. Uh, so also, you should just be yourself, right? So you can't be someone else, right? You might have a uh, friend who is excellent in everything, and it doesn't matter if you are not excellent in everything, right? So you have to just be yourself and bring yourself to the interview. You don't have to fake anything when it comes to the interviews. That is mainly because uh, even if you fake the interview and somehow get through uh, and get the job, you might not be able to perform very well in the position that you're going to gain. and you might be struggling as well as the organization also might be in trouble in that case. So it's okay to bring yourself to the interview, not someone else. Uh, so basically, when it comes to stories, right? So everybody loves to hear stories, right? So uh, basically, you have to bring your story with you. From where did you start, and how did you uh, fall in love with the industry? Maybe the technologies that you are using, and you have to make that personal connection with everything that you do. Then only you can basically convince someone uh, and get what you want to get, right? First things first, and dress codes, right? So this is a uh, question that most of the people have. How do I dress for an interview, right? So let's see some examples. So I think it's a no-brainer, right? So uh, the girl in the black trousers or jeans would be the preferable one, because her dress code is more professional and decent, right? So uh, so when you select your dress code, you will have to follow these guidelines, and you will have to uh, be in a decent dress rather than fancy dress, right? um, yeah, move on, and we have some uh, gents styles as well. I would say, like, uh, maybe the middle one would work for me. Our industry is somewhat casual, so something in between uh, should work, right? Definitely not the left-hand side guy. And so yes, so you will never get a, second chance to make the first impression. So that's why it's called the first impression. So it's really important that the way you connect with the interview panel, and let's see how we can do that. So also, when it comes to the dress code, so that is the first thing the interview panel or the organization might be seeing from you, right? So physically, right? So it's really important that you follow the correct procedures, and be decent when it comes to the dress code. So, and there are things like, you are not a billboard, maybe you are not a advertising board that you carry logos here and there. So it's I mean, pretty straightforward, right? um, yeah. So when it comes to the interview, or any sort of an interaction, I would say nonverbal communication is very important, right? So uh, because these nonverbal interactions will tell the other party a message about the level of confidence that you have, and the level of knowledge that you have, and it will convey a very strong message when used correctly. uh, so it will score a lot of points for you without even get yourself into uh, a difficult situation, as well as without much effort, right? So uh, what is the start of the nonverbal communication, right? So first is the, maybe before the handshake there should be a smile as well, right? When you uh, meet the panel, you have to greet the panel, and you have to at least give a smile and look at them in their eyes uh, without looking elsewhere. You have to maintain eye contact as well. Then comes the handshake, right? So there are different ways of shaking hands, right? So we have a slide after this about different handshakes. So uh, main thing is you have to be firm as well as soft when it comes to handshakes, right? So uh, when it becomes light, you don't get any feeling about that person, right? So it should be the right amount of uh, uh, power that you have to apply for your handshake. And if it becomes light, it doesn't convey any message or any meaning. It's just, something that nobody will enjoy, right? So uh, then also the other extreme, when you overpower the handshake, it also becomes a problem. uh, since I think we have done a lot of interviews uh, during past few years. So uh, I have seen a lot of people doing the handshake in the uh, uh, inappropriate way, I would say, right? So it is basically scoring, not scoring you any marks, so might be reducing marks, right? So you have to learn how to do a proper handshake. Maybe you can go to YouTube and see how it is done, and maybe practice with your friends and family and get it to a, you know certain level. But given the situation, I mean, given the current situation of the country, we might not actually shake hands for some time. But then again, it's a good skill to have, right? So it will not entirely go away. So you have to learn that and you have to practice that, right? It's very important. As well as next comes the posture. So posture means how you basically stand or sit, right? How you hold your head, right? So there are some people I have seen like this, right? So with the bent back, and there are some people like leaning forward to the table, right? So touching the table, right? uh, or there are different things, right? So you have to have the correct posture, and uh, my kid is here. Achi, enna vayanna, right? Right. Uh, Actually, these are the benefits that you have when you're working from home. Uh, yeah. So the posture is very important, and the eye contact that I mentioned earlier. So you have to look right in the eye of the person that you are talking, and you shouldn't look anywhere else. And if you are talking to someone, you have to look the person direct in the eye. Uh, so then unnecessary movements, as I mentioned, you might be tapping the table, and you might be, uh, doing that, awkward movement with your leg, right? So there are certain things that people do when they are put under stress, right? So we have to be aware and be mindful, and we have to control this situation in a way that it favors us, right? Yeah, different types of handshakes. I mean, I love these graphics, right? So dead fish means you don't get any feeling about that person when you're shaking hands. It might be cold hands, and it might be very light, and they might not do anything with you with the hand, right? They might not even hold your hand, right? And the bone crusher. So there are some people, maybe, very strong people. So they might try to grab the hand with the entire force that they have in their hands, right? So it's not also a very good way to shake hands. And queen fingertips. So it's like, I think you all have seen this this handshake in movies, and when royals are interacting, right? So it's not also something advisable. So the correct handshake is depicted in the below picture, the picture below. It's a way you do, but I mean, you can't uh, teach it by showing a picture, but you have to practice it. It's something that you have to practice, right? Um, and also, there's another very important thing. When you come for the handshake, if your hand is wet, it's also a bit awkward, right? So I have faced this situation plenty of times, right? So it's somewhat awkward to shake a wet hand, right? So when I encounter that situation when my hand is wet and when I have to shake someone's hand, what I do is usually I apologize to that person, or I apologize and I might not shake the hand at all, uh, and maybe I say like Iboan or something like that when my hand is wet, right? So it's not comfortable for the other party when your hand is wet. So you have to be aware of that, or you might have to use tissues or something like that to keep your hands dry, right? And when it comes to interview itself, let's see what are the do's and don'ts. So you have to plan to arrive uh, at the place at least 15 minutes early. Uh, I would say, let's say half an hour early uh, will be the best, right? So you can be at the place and you can get comfortable to the atmosphere and you can make yourself home during that time, right? Otherwise you will be always stressed and you will be always looking at the uh, uh, watch or your phone, and you'll be checking time, and it all becomes a mess when you get late to something, right? So plan to arrive at the place at least 15 minutes, 30 minutes is the best, I would say, right? So you can have a when you come for an interview at Cisco Labs, you can have a drink or a tea and you can make yourself comfortable there, right? So then, when you face the interviewer, you have to greet the interviewer. So we touched this part earlier as well. So you have to greet the interviewer. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time. You have to greet the person, and remember, you have to look in the eye, and you have to, uh, uh, make eye contact, and you have to smile as well, right? So then. Uh, when it comes to the conversation, so usually the interviewer will lead the conversation and you have to allow them to talk first, right? So an experienced interviewer will know how to uh, uh, extract information from you. They will ask the correct questions. So they might not be doing your interview as their first interview, right? So they will be uh, trained professionals always, right? So they might have gone through hundreds of interviews, so they know the drill. They know what are the questions that they are going to ask from you, and they will basically uh, uh, excel in this particular thing. So in our company, we also have this particular thing where we groom the young people to be interviewers, and it's a very good process where you put young people with the experienced people and groom them. So I think every company has these sort of processes to keep your interviewers sharp, right? So in that case, you have to show your respect to the interviewer, and you have to allow them to uh, lead the conversation. Uh, so this is the first question that anybody would ask, right? Tell me something about yourself, right? So this is where it starts usually after the greeting, and when you uh, sit down on the chair, this has to be the first question, right? uh, so for this question, when I usually ask this question, uh, if the person can't give me a direct answer, or if I feel that the person is not prepared, right, uh, to give an answer for this question, that person might lose some marks, right? Because everybody should be able to tell something about themselves, right? does, what my mother does, where did I study, where did I get my degree, what are my interests, right? Maybe I'm a cricket fan, maybe I'm a Formula One fan, right? Maybe I'm a movie fan, maybe I'm a reader, right? So you have to tell the truth as well, right? So it's very important. I mean, we will touch that point in somewhere else as well. But now I will give you an example where someone actually told me that person is a reader, right? So unfortunately, I'm also a avid reader. So so I asked some questions about books and literature and everything, right? So that person couldn't answer those questions, and it was like that person was basically lying, right? So you have to be prepared for that as well, right? So when that's the problem with not revealing the truth, right? So you have to be truthful and you have to be yourself, right? So that's why it is asked as tell me something about yourself, right? So anything, right? So everybody will have their own personal stuff that can be shared with others and interests and whatnot, right? So uh, try to put that out and try to be prepared for this as well, right? So you have to at least use 5 6 sentences and couple of minutes to give an explanation or give a detailed description about yourself, right? uh, so you can highlight your achievements as well, right? For example, you might be someone who's excelling in sports, right? Or you might be someone who's excelling uh, with studies, right? And these things you can basically highlight, right? So also you have to be very enthusiastic about the interview and the entire process, because these people who are interviewing you are spending their valuable time, maybe 1 hour or 1.5 hours, to try to get you a job, right? So keep that in mind and make sure that you are respecting that contribution or uh, uh, the time that they are investing on you, right? So yes, yes. So when you are asked a certain question, so uh, you should be speaking in relation to the position that you are hired for, right? So let's say uh, now this might not be directly applicable uh, for a fresh graduate, but let's say for an experienced person, uh, let's say for senior software engineer or a technical lead, uh, we ask something like, let's say uh, maybe uh, object oriented principles or database design principles, right? So if that person answers that question with a fresh graduate's mindset, let's say he comes up with uh, 3 principles or 4 principles of inheritance, encapsulation, polymorphism, abstraction, and he gave us some textbook examples, right? That might not work, right? So though that sort of a person should come up with real life examples. When you have experience, you have to answer these questions with your experience, right? So for a fresh graduate, for a fresh graduate, it might be okay to give a textbook example, but still you can give your own examples from your own experiences that you have done from the projects that you have done as the coursework, right? uh, so also, uh, we have seen plenty of situations where people use single words to answer, right? Yes or no, right? So usually, uh, the initial questions that we ask will lead to more questions, right? So to ask more questions, you have to provide more details, right? So basically, when you say yes or no to something, we don't have a we might not have a way to ask follow-up questions, right? So you have to explain your answers a little bit or appropriately, right? Uh, to allow the interviewer to grab the answer and come up with another question that might be related to the answer that you are giving, right? So a simple yes or no might not work in most of the situations. And also, uh, so uh, you can ask questions as well, right? So many people don't know this, right? So if you are not clear about something that is being asked from you, you can ask questions and clarify that, right? So I have seen many situations where the person doesn't understand the question and still goes and uh, answer provide a different answer that than what we expect, right? So uh, it's it's basically not in favor of you. So you can answer questions to clarify the questions that are being asked, right? So you can request more details, right? So that is something that we look in the interviewers, right? If they are asking correct questions, right? So sometimes we deliberately not provide the entire picture when we are asking a question from you, expecting you to ask those questions and clarify that area, right? So that is something that we do on daily basis when you are working as a software engineer. So you will not be provided the entire set of information that you need to know, right? No one is able to provide the entire set of information. So you have to have the skill of you know asking relevant questions and asking questions around the knowledge that you gain and clarify the picture, right? So that is something that we measure during the interview. So you should ask questions, right? You can and you should ask questions, right? And also when it comes to explaining things or maybe asking questions, you have to be very concise, right? So you can't go on and on and on and on uh, explaining something, so we might run out of time, right? So you have to be conscious about that, and that is also a skill that you have to develop, right? So uh, that is the summarizing, right? So you have to learn how to summarize things, and you have to learn how to tell a certain thing in less number of words, right? So that is something that you need to learn. And also it's very important that you provide the proper examples, right? So as I mentioned earlier, right? So the examples should be relevant to the situation, right? So if you are a technical lead, you can't take uh, when you explain about inheritance, you you must not take animal, cat, dog, that example, right? So you have to have your own examples, right? So even for a graduate, fresh graduate, it would help if you have your own examples to explain things. uh, it might give you an edge over the others, right? So instead of cat and dog, I'm not saying you have to use vehicle, bus, and those things, but uh, a real life example, right? So that's that about examples. So you have to come up with relevant examples, right? Again, we come to the honesty. So you have to be honest with your answers, and you have to be uh, honest throughout the process, right? So otherwise, s- at some point, it will come and bite you, right? So it's something that we always admire, honesty, right? So when you are asked a question that you are not aware of, right? You can be honest and you can tell the panel that I can't remember that, right? Or else you can say, if you have not learned that, I have not learned that, right? So that is an answer that you can give, and it will also help the panel to move on, right, without wasting more time by analyzing your fake answer. And that entire process can be cut off by being honest. I don't know, I can't remember, right? So we don't expect you to remember everything, we don't expect you to know everything, right? So that's what an interview panel is doing, right? So they don't want you to remember everything, right? So we have Stack Overflow, we have Google, and we have everything, right? We don't want to remember everything, right? So we, when you don't know something, you can say, I don't know that, I can't remember that, I have not learned that. So those are acceptable answers. But when it comes to fundamental knowledge, right, when it comes to principles, you have to know the principles, right? That should be a very important part of your uh, preparation, interview preparation. You have to brush up your principles, right? So if you say you don't know principle, it might not look good on you, right? But you might not have applied that, right? But the principles you have learned during your curriculum and your course, you have to know these things, right? uh, that's a part of the preparation, right? So again, uh, when it comes to don'ts, uh, so basically, uh, we have touched these things. Being late is a no. Avoiding eye contact is a no. You have to maintain eye contact all the time. Memorizing answers to possible interview questions. So I would say possible interview question. Uh, I would say maybe sorting algorithms, array sorting algorithms, right? Roshan, software engineers, right? We are talking to.
Yes, we are talking with yeah,
Yes. Yes.
third year,
Okay.
third years.
Yes. Okay. So, right? There are multiple algorithms to sort an array. Uh, so you can memorize these things. You have to memorize up to a certain extent on these things, but memorizing alone will not get you there, right? Because for every question that we will ask, there will be follow-up questions, right? So these follow-up questions will actually are these follow-up questions are designed to extract information from you and to validate whether you are 100% aware of the answer that you have given previously, right? So these follow-up questions will definitely reveal that you are memorizing answers. So you don't have to memorize, you have to learn, and you have to practice, and you have to be practical, right? So in that case, you can explain anything in your words. You should be fine, right? uh, so for this, what I can remember is, I think most of you have uh, uh, seen Three Idiots movie. Roshan, have you watched that?
Yes, yes, even I watched that
Yes.
Geethanga.
Yes, yes. I'm not a big fan of Hindi movies, but that's a good movie. So in there, you have a situation where the professor asks that guy to explain about machines, right? So that's about memorizing, right? So if you can go back and watch that part in YouTube, so that's how you memorize, and that's how you tell something in your own words, right? And also the other thing is listening, right? So listening is a skill, right? So a lot of people don't know that it's a skill, because a lot of people don't focus on listening, right? To be honest, in our yearly or annual appraisal, where we select people for uh, uh, people to be promoted, and we give them feedback. That's the annual appraisal process. uh, so in there, listening is an attribute that we measure in people, right? So if you are a good listener, that's something that we measure, right? So it's that important, right? So you have to learn how to listen very well, and you have to learn that skill, and you have to be a good listener, right? So otherwise you might not be getting the question entirely. You might be answering a different question. So likewise, there can be disadvantages for you, right? So being unprepared, right? So I touched this part already. So uh, fundamentals, uh, uh, theories, you have to be prepared with these things, right? You should know these things as fresh graduates, right? So if I ask you what are the uh, uh, acid properties, right, you might not have learned it still, but that is something that you need to know, right? So I have graduated, I don't know, 13 years back. I still remember acid properties, right? So that's something you should remember, right? That is something that you should be prepared with, right? Uh, Again, dishonesty is not something that we really want from the candidates, and inappropriate attire, right? So we discussed that part as well. Let's move on. So and the other thing is lack of focus, right? So if you are not focusing on the questions that are being asked from you, and that might not look very good in you, right? uh, so the amount of communication, right? So if you are communicating too little or too much, you have to balance that part, right? So you have to basically uh, work on that aspect of your communication, right? So you have to use professional jargon. You should not use slang or street speak uh, uh, when you are basically facing an interview. I think that's very important, right? So you have to be professional, right? And also you should not be arrogant as well, because these people who are interviewing you are trying to get you a job, right? So it's not only you, they are also trying to get you a job, right? So you have to be respectful to these guys, and you should not be arrogant, right? So and also no personal discussions as well. So it's not appropriate, I mean, to discuss personal things. uh, I have been to that place, එතන මෙහෙමයි, and those things are not relevant to these uh, interviews, right? So again, it comes with the professional uh, aspect, right? And also the salary and the package details. uh, so usually in most of the companies, so these things will be taken up uh, at the latter parts of the interview process, right? I think almost in all the companies that happens at the latter parts of the interview process. So maybe the first couple of interviews will not even touch on these areas, right? So you should not bring these things up until the question is asked from you. So uh, that will be discussed in a mostly that will be discussed in a separate meeting, right? So when it comes to the closure of the interview, let's see what we need to check, right? Uh, so basically, at the end of the interview, you should reflect about yourself as well. Uh, uh, I think honestly, you will have a feeling about the result of the interview, right? So you have a gauge of yourself, and you might know that you have faced very well, or average, or you have messed it up, right? So you will know that, right? Uh, so uh, interviewers will basically uh, finalize the interview, close the interview, and basically they will allow you to, I think most of the times what will happen is at the end of the interview, you will be allowed to ask questions from the interviewers, right? So uh, so that's how it usually ends, right? So when uh, so what you can do is at that point, uh, now when you are given the chance to ask questions, I have seen, I would say 75% or 80% of the candidates that I have interviewed, uh, they don't have any questions, right? Uh, which is not very good as well, right? So you have to ask something, right? So you have to work on that as well. You have to uh, get ready to ask some questions from the interviewers, uh, not technical questions, obviously, something about company culture, or there are different things that you don't know about the company, right? This is a good time for you to ask questions and clarify these things, so that you can be better prepared for the next stages of the uh, interview, right? Interviews, right? So also, usually, the interviewers would say or speak a few words about the next stages of the interview, right? So uh, it depends on the company and the interview as well. But if it doesn't come out, you can politely ask about the process and how it works. Uh, so, what are the next steps of the interview, right? So that is an acceptable question. You can basically ask that if it is not said. And also uh, most of the times you can ask when you will be contacted as well. So that is something that you can do. And also you have to thank the interviewer or the interview panel, because again, they were trying to get you a job, right? So you have to be thankful for that fact, right? So that's how you basically close an interview. Uh, yeah. Now, I have failed several interviews, right? In fact, I have failed my first interview as well. That is about, I don't know, 14, 15 years back. Uh, but it's okay to fail an interview, right? So it will give you a lot of things to learn. And if you analyze your failures really well, you can use that failure as a stepping stone for much greater things in future, right? So that's what at least I did. So I mean, that's something that you can definitely do. I'm pretty sure about that. So it's a learning experience, right? So let me tell you another thing from my angle as well, right? So I am an interviewer, so I love doing interviews, right? Roshen knows this. When an interview is there, I will never say no, right? That's
Yes, that's
yeah,
true.
that's mainly because I get to meet new people, I get to learn new things, right? So likewise, uh, for you also, it can be a learning opportunity, right? Some interviewers might correct your mistakes, right? So they will tell you how to do certain thing in the accepted manner rather than the way that you have done. So they will, most of the interviewers will tell you about your mistakes, right? So it's not correct, it's not the correct way, you have to do it this way, right? So it's a very good learning opportunity where you will be scrutinized by an industry expert most of the times, right? So use that as a learning. So I think, yes, that's about it from us for today.